Right now, it is time to bring in Jim Lynch. Cover your assets. Jim, of course, is an independent voice on Wall Street, the economy, politics, sports. Brings over 40 years of experience to these subjects and more. And on a Tuesday morning, we welcome Jim into the mix again. Good morning, Mr. Lynch.
And good morning very much to you, too.
Good morning very much.
Yes, indeed.
What the hell's going
What's the
on?
happy music? Do you have a carousel? Are you running
Marshall has dubbed me acting Jim Lynch, so
right.
I thought I might kind of stir it up a little bit.
So that means you don't have to be confirmed by Congress? Is that what it means?
Not yet, not yet.
Oh, okay.
After 10 years, I'm still not confirmed.
That's right.
Anyhow, that said, morning, everybody. I hope you're doing very well, and I hope you've gotten some effective ways to deal with the morass of news that comes our way, and keep the stiff upper lip and your health and wealth. What we'd like to talk about today to begin with is something that is very, very significant. We touched on it in the last show, but a man named Ray Dalio, who is a $6 billion hedge fund investor, he wrote a column for Bloomberg News. It's on the internet. And he was also on CBS 60 Minutes on Sunday. And his topic is, in capitalism, we have an income equality, which he says is a national emergency. And if you read the article, listen to these words, watch him on CBS 60 Minutes, you'll find out how this is really the national emergency and nothing else. Certainly not the southern border. Maybe it's a national emergency in the White House, but let's forget about those things and talk about every citizen in this country. Mr. Dalio, by the way, has given $100 million to education, combining with the state of Connecticut and other sources. He's a self-made billionaire. When he was a kid, he'd, like I used to do, deliver papers and do a lot of odd jobs. So much so, that's when he got interested in the stock market, and he actually started buying stocks. And eventually, he got into Wall Street and created his own business. He's certainly a good citizen for taking the time to give us his thoughts, and certainly a good citizen in acknowledging that while he's at the top of the heap, and he's saying, "Hey, this is my country. I live the American dream. I made it. I was given opportunities." As he points out in this article, in his day, he didn't have any money, yet he was able to go to college and to do graduate work. The government helped do that. And implicit in that is, why can't we do that now, since as a country we've got so much more money? He points out something which is very, very disturbing in the article, which is certainly not his opinion, but is statistically proven, that 60% of our population, 60% of 100%, is going backwards. They're not growing, they're not improving. Be it not getting good wages, healthcare costs, lack of sponsorship by the government and education. But the point is 60% of our people are going the wrong way. We're dealing with eyeballing at 125 million people. That's a lot of people. Also, he points out, and this is well known, that the wealth gap and the problems we are incurring in our society is very much like the 1930s. And in the 1930s, we had foreign governments encounter populist uprisings because the people were very dissatisfied. and you have movements on the far left and far right during those times, and governments were overturned and authoritarian regimes created. His feeling, and I would imagine it's a lot of people's feelings, is that that's the way we're going right now unless we correct this. And very importantly, Ray Dalio doesn't say the tax cut for people was bad per se, the big tax cut for the upper 5-10%. But the tax dollars are not that are saved, and people now have that money. They're not being put back into the economy in a productive way, and so it's kind of wasted. Joe or Sally having an extra 50 to 100 grand in their bank account doesn't do anything for the population that in many ways serves them, particularly the government that protects them, be it on the foreign fields or the fire departments or whatever.
Well,
the same Joe and Sally might have $1.5 million already in the bank, so they get 50 and 100 more. It just goes in the bank. It doesn't produce anything. It produces interest for them, but it doesn't produce anything for the overall economy.
But Jim,
excuse me, just let me finish this point. And it was espoused in the Republican tax plan and in the Trump tax plan that this would get the economy going. Well, it doesn't get the economy going if you don't have a plan for this money, and we never had a plan. Go ahead, Joe.
Two things: the vast gap between what the vast income inequality gap. Years back, and you think about different institutions that were founded or created by the robber barons, the railroad guys, our group, and then you fast forward to this current lot of gazillionaires, and outside of Bill Gates, who's actually older than I'm thinking of Zuckerberg, etc. I know they've all got foundations, but where's that? Like, what are they? How is that? Seems to me, and I'm sorry, this is just my view, but it seems to me that money is going more towards them and building bunkers than it is back into a society.
Well, in terms of Gates, he and his wife Melinda, they're doing a lot of work on an international level with curbing disease and so forth. And you might say, well... No.
Gates, Gates is not on that list. Gates...
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
Gates was actually mentored by Warren Buffett, who is someone who has a real idea of, that the reciprocity, what you have to plow back. And no, I'm thinking more about Mark Zuckerberg, for example, or a lot of these Silicon Valley types that have literally billions to buy vineyards and do stuff with. But and I'm sure there's a lot that we don't know about philanthropic endeavors. But I also know that here in little tiny Millerton, New York, or Sharon, Connecticut, or Lakeville, there's not a huge sense of, hey, we've got to give back to, there's the whole volunteer sort of compact doesn't seem as prevalent as it once was.
Okay, you're absolutely right on that, particularly when you look at it from an historical standpoint. The billionaires, millionaires of old not only gave back, but they gave back to very, very specific things that would help the population at large. So you're right in terms, in your opinion, in my opinion, you're right in terms of the, you don't have a plethora of billionaires giving. But you do have a lot of noted people, like a Warren Buffett, who is giving all his money away through Gates and has consistently been giving money away, who basically has said he shouldn't get a tax cut. He should pay more taxes. So there is a sentiment among people, a minority, obviously, that feels a responsibility. And I get from these people that what they really feel is that giving back is kind of like an act of gratitude for what they've gotten. But I wasn't really going down the field of the people who are the billionaire class. I was probably going where Dalio might be going. I don't know that he is, however. But the dollars that we gave to the 10%, the extra dollars, maybe 20%, I don't have numbers. But the monies we gave to them in terms of a tax cut could have been worked out to put X amount of money back into the economy, rather through the government and quasi-government corporations, and not just. It was made too simple, and it was made too simple a tax cut because politically it was a big win for the people of the Republican Party in Congress and so forth. So, politics is politics, but the point is we've got a bigger issue here. I agree with Mr. Dalio. There is a national emergency. We do need to somehow, government has got to kickstart it and say, this is the goal, to get our country back to where we used to be, where a kid goes to high school and he knows his field is pretty unlimited based on his intelligence, his willingness to work. That kid needs to be given the opportunity to put his God-given intelligence to work, and his guts and his grit and his physicality to the wheel to make a success of himself.
What you're talking about, Axios had a great story called The New Form of American Capitalism yesterday. And in it, they describe how even members of the 1%, the people that have really benefited over the past 60 years in where money goes, say that things have got to change. J.P. Morgan Chase chairman and Jamie Dimon, they're no friends of the 90%ers, wrote that capitalism doesn't. Capitalism. Here's the basic thing. This is not to say that capitalism does not have flaws, that it isn't leaving people behind, and that it shouldn't be improved. This is from people high up, and it's amazing. And I know people are going to laugh at this, but 5 years of Bernie Sanders on the road, speaking to people about the 1% and the other percent is making a difference. And I think that some of the younger people, even though they're not really young, that are in that 1% are starting to see if that capitalism has to be massaged every once in a while.
Well, I hope that some of those people in that 1%, and I'm talking to you, Mark Zuckerberg, who have billions of dollars for a product that is, I don't know, whatever, start figuring out a way to get some of that money back into, let's call it the system, for lack of a better word, so that some of those opportunities that no longer exist or that have been minimized can be recreated. Now, I think in conjunction with Connecticut, there was a huge, there was a $100 million donation, right?
To schools, yes.
For
right.
Improved public education and economic opportunity. $100 million from the state, matched by $100 million from Bridgewater, or personally, plus $100 million from other philanthropists and business leaders. And that's just, that is, I would, whilst talking about how profits can be, let's just call it adjusted, I very much like to see, again, some people not in their 60s or 50s, but rather people in their 40s, etc. And I'm sure they're out there.
But I think
we just don't hear about it.
I think it's coming because at the end of this article, it says the following: "It's hard to imagine a more worthy debate at a more important time for America about where the money goes." And here's the key line, which is really true. It's tempting to fixate on Trump, but the real action is the policy and philosophical debate. And that's what Bernie Sanders does. He doesn't get out there and talk about Donald Trump.
But he's a grown-up. You've got the little ones.
But what I'm saying is he's trying to lay the groundwork for, that the fundamental change that they're looking for, and Jim, and you would know this, I mean, you've dealt with money your whole life, is that, yes, rich people, there's nothing wrong with rich people. You need rich people to have a successful country and a successful world. You need rich people. But it used to be, no matter how they got rich, whether it was selling liquor, whether it was they got rich, they gave back to society.
And we've got a whole group that isn't.
That is taking the richness they get and putting it back to them into themselves.
Right.
And that's
the issue, in my view.
That is the fundamental issue that Bernie Sanders is talking about.
And what has to happen?
You don't want to end Wall Street. You want Wall Street to be successful, but you want those successful people to give back and build like the Mellons, the Rockefellers, the Kennedys. Yes, they got their money and they're.
That's what I was trying to say 10 minutes ago. It's like what we need is this new group that has vast wealth
to step forward. All the hedge funders and stuff like that that are doing this. That's exactly right. That you need them to step forward and say, okay, I can still have I can make a lot of money, but I can give a lot of money back.
I've got so much that it's not a ham sandwich. My great grandson's great grandson.
And you must have seen this debate developing, Jim, because you've been around the money. You've been around people investing and they're trying to make money with their money for what 40, 50 years.
Okay, but we need a spearhead for this, and we need a policy, and we need a plan. And we need a government that is of and for the people. And right now, we've got a divided government where we do have a lot of people who are willing to sell their vote and just do things which are not in the interest of the entire country, but in the interest of the favored few. We've got too much of this my way or the highway, and too much, as I see it, people who are now representing the whole country or representing a whole state who are coming out and they have these views on people's religions or their sexuality or whatever. We've got to get rid of that stuff if we're going to get back to being a first-class country. We're a country of people. As this young guy from Indianapolis has said, I only answer to my creator for who I am. He happens to be a homosexual. But if you put that in context, God, if you don't believe in God, then this doesn't work for you. God made people, and they come out the way they come out. Black, white, homosexual, straight, whatever. The point is, this is it. I mean, you look throughout the world at the sexuality of people in various countries. Many of them have homosexual people there, or whatever they're called today. That doesn't make it good or bad, but it makes it practical. We're not alone in this thing. What we have to do is get people in office who agree that this government is for and of the people. And we have to give an inspiration to those citizens who have fallen behind. Maybe it's their fault. Frequently, it's not their fault. That said, we have to get conscious ourselves of what's happening, and we've got to begin, if we are not in, shall we say, a positive frame of mind generally to get there. I'm talking generally on not any specific issue. And we've got to be able to say, okay, we have opportunity here. The fact that many kids can hardly get through high school because they're actually not being given enough support in getting over their reading difficulty or their attention span or whatever, that's taking us back. It's not moving us forward. In this country, we are a democracy. We have a vote. We have a voice. Let's use it in the most positive way we can. But let's keep positive into ourselves, and let's not give up hope. But let's not go with what has been preached, unfortunately, too much by the politicians, that the almighty dollar is number one. The almighty dollar is not number one if you're in a hospital without insurance. If your kid didn't get through high school and has had a job for the rest of his life as a dishwasher. That's what the almighty dollar can do if you take it to its zenith. As Marshall said on the last show, capitalism, socialism, social capitalism, I think he said. That's the way we go. Folks, the programs you're enjoying were created in the 30s by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, one of the greatest presidents ever. Social Security, health care, and Truman and Johnson. These are not socialistic things. These are for the people. Your Social Security, your Medicare, your highways, your byways, your firemen, your policemen. Is that socialism because it's government dominated or oriented or paid for? No, it's not. It's the way it's the way a good country runs. And I'm probably running out of time, but I've got to quickly say this. Finland. You know, Finland had an experiment for 2 years, a small experiment. They gave $7,000 a year for 2 years to 2,000 people who are on out of work. Study's over. They did this psychological and economic tests. Bottom line, those people who got this money for the 2 years, even though they didn't really get that much better economically for whatever reason, they felt more positive about themselves and more positives about going forward than they had prior to it. That's a human experiment. We need hope.
All right.
The government is of and for the people. And if you're not conversant with your Constitution, with your Declaration, with your rights, get it together.
All right.
Because unfortunately, Dalio's story of what happened in the 30s, I don't think it'll happen here. It's not going to happen on my watch. It could materialize, or it could get uglier.
Right.
We need better people in the Congress and Senate who think as patriots, not as profiteers.
All right. That's a great way to end it.
Okay, well, we're only beginning.
Okay, that's right.
God love you. Keep going. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, Jim.
Bye-bye.
Jim Lynch, and Cover Your Assets this morning here on the Breakfast Club on Robert Hood Radio, and you can hear Jim again, once again, online. RobertHoodRadio.com. Click on demand. Click on Jim Lynch, Cover Your Assets.